Have you ever wondered if growing old has to mean giving up control? In today's video, we're diving into the lives of seniors who defied the norm, choosing independence, creativity, and adventure over the confines of a nursing home. From a resilient old man who refuses to surrender his daily routines to a TikTok dancing grandma who's redefining what it means to be ageless, each story challenges the stereotypes of aging. Stay with us until the end because these inspiring journeys will not only reshape your view on old age but also empower you to consider a life where every day is lived on your own. A minute of listening could spark a lifetime of understanding about the true meaning of freedom and self-determination. Let's explore how these remarkable individuals are proving that growing older can be a time of reinvention and joy. Before we begin, I would appreciate it if you like this video, you can help me continue to spread the old age lesson. If you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. If you like this video, please comment number 1. If you don't like it, comment number 0 to let me know so I can make a better video for you. Now let's get started. Story 1. The resilient old man, Mr. Bernard. At 87, Mr. Bernard remained steadfast in his independence, just as he had been his entire life. He had always believed, as long as I'm breathing, I'm in charge of my own life. That belief had shaped his every decision, his every routine, and the way he faced the challenges of aging. Every morning, he started his day with a cup of black coffee. No sugar, no milk. Just like life itself, he often joked, strong and unfiltered. He would then take his usual walk around the neighborhood, moving at a leisurely pace, greeting old friends, and taking in the familiar sights of the town he had called home for decades. His first stop was the local bakery, where the aroma of fresh bread and pastries filled the air. Here, he would engage in long-winded discussions about current affairs with his longtime friends, reminiscing and analyzing the present. The bakery was more than just a place to buy bread. It was a cornerstone of his daily social life, a sanctuary of camaraderie. After his visit, he would return home, where a stack of historical novels sat beside his favorite armchair. Reading had always been his escape, his way of traveling through time without ever leaving his living room. His home, a quaint cottage with a small but well-kept garden, was a reflection of his personality. Simple, sturdy, and full of character. The walls held memories in the form of photographs and trinkets collected over the years, reminders of a life well lived. But as time went on, Bernard felt his body beginning to betray him. The once effortless walks became tiring, his joints ached more often, and simple tasks like bending down to tend to his garden or carrying a bag of groceries felt increasingly difficult. His family grew concerned. His daughter Ellen suggested he move into a nursing home where he could receive around-the-clock care. But Bernard scoffed at the idea. "I've managed to take care of myself for decades. Why would I stop now?" he retorted, shaking his head. To him, moving into a nursing home felt like surrendering everything that made life worth living. He wasn't ready to trade his peaceful mornings for a structured schedule, his small but beloved home for a sterile room, or his cherished freedom for institutionalized care. He wasn't just an old man, he was still Bernard, a man who had lived through war, economic hardships, and personal losses and had always found a way to stand on his own 2 feet. Why should aging be any different? Instead of resigning himself to what others deemed inevitable, Bernard decided to adapt. He hired a housekeeper to assist with household chores, installed safety rails in his bathroom, and set up an emergency alert system for peace of mind. His daughter began visiting weekly, taking him grocery shopping and preparing meals together, a routine that brought them even closer. Neighbors checked in on him now and then, and he found himself appreciating their company more than he cared to admit. Despite the adjustments, Bernard never felt like he had lost his independence. He still had his morning coffee the way he liked it. He still went to the bakery, albeit with a cane. He still sat in his armchair with a book in his hands, losing himself in the pages of history. And most importantly, he still made his own choices. Mr. Bernard's story is a powerful reminder that aging doesn't mean losing control over your life. It's about adapting, about finding ways to hold on to the things that matter most. Story 2. The TikToker Grandma, Mrs. At 78, Mrs. Agatha never believed that old age meant slowing down. She had always been full of energy, whether it was tending to her garden, knitting colorful scarves for her grandchildren, or baking her famous apple pie that had been a family favorite for generations. But one particular afternoon, she stumbled upon something completely unexpected. Something that would change the rhythm of her golden years. She walked into the living room and found her grandchildren, Lily and James, hunched over their phones, giggling at something on the screen. Curious, she peered over Lily's shoulder and asked, "What's so funny? Show me." Lily turned to her, eyes twinkling with amusement. "Grandma, this is TikTok. People make fun videos, dance, and even go live to chat with others." Mrs. Agatha raised an intrigued eyebrow. "So, can old folks join too?" Lily chuckled. "No one's stopping you, Grandma, but I've never seen anyone like you do it before." That was all the encouragement she needed. Determined to give it a shot, Mrs. Agatha enlisted Lily's help in setting up an account. For her very first video, she kept it simple. Just a short clip of herself swaying to an old jazz tune while kneading dough for her famous cinnamon rolls. She added a caption, "Dancing while baking, because why not?" With a click, she uploaded it and thought nothing more of it. What happened next surprised everyone. By the next morning, her phone was buzzing with notifications. Strangers from all over the world had left comments. "Grandma, you're adorable. I wish my grandma was this cool. More dance videos, please." Mrs. Agatha read each message with wide eyes and a growing smile. She turned to Lily, laughing. "Well, dear, it looks like I have an audience." Encouraged by the warm reception, she decided to post more. Each week, she tried something new. One day, she attempted a trending dance challenge. Her movements were a little stiff but filled with enthusiasm. Another day, she live-streamed herself making her family's secret soup recipe, sharing cooking tips and childhood stories along the way. She even started taking requests, like recreating classic dance moves from the 60s and 70s. What she loved most, though, was getting her family involved. Her son, initially skeptical, soon found himself behind the camera, helping her film. Her granddaughter joined her for quick Q&A challenges, answering questions from curious followers. Even Mr. Thompson, the elderly neighbor who had always been a bit grumpy, was convinced to co-host a live stream about plant care. The internet had given her a new way to connect not only with strangers but with the people she loved most. Of course, not everyone approved. Some of her old friends and neighbors shook their heads disapprovingly. "You're old, Agatha. Just relax and stop acting like a teenager," one of them remarked. But Mrs. Agatha simply laughed. "Why not? I've never done this before. It's time to try." And so she continued, her followers growing by the day. Some of them were young people who saw her as a source of inspiration, while others were seniors who commented, "You've given me the courage to try something new, too." One evening, as she finished responding to a flood of heartwarming messages, she turned to Lily and asked, "What's next?" "Should I try gaming?" Lily gasped. "Grandma, you want to stream video games?" Mrs. Agatha grinned. "Why not? I hear Mario Kart is fun." Her story is a reminder that age should never limit new experiences. She didn't just embrace change, she danced right into it, proving that it's never too late to learn, to laugh, and to live boldly. If you are still watching this video and finding these lessons useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Story 3. The Adventurous Grandpa, Mr. At 88 years old, Mr. Henry had no intention of spending his remaining years confined to an old armchair, staring out the window and reminiscing. He had always believed that the world was vast and filled with wonders waiting to be explored. Why should age hold him back from seeing it for himself? The idea struck him one afternoon as he visited his grandson, Jake. Hanging on the wall of Jake's room was a large map of the United States, dotted with colorful pins marking the places Jake had traveled. Mr. Henry traced the map with his fingers, recalling the few states he had visited in his lifetime. As the realization set in, he shook his head and muttered, "I've barely seen any of this great country." A spark ignited within him. Why not embark on one grand adventure while he still had the chance? No one in the family took him seriously at first. "Dad, you're 88. You don't need to be driving across the country alone," his daughter, Laura, protested. "Maybe we can take a trip together?" But Mr. Henry knew this was something he had to do on his terms. He dusted off an old notebook, grabbed a pen, and began planning. With every city he listed and every route he mapped, his excitement grew. He wouldn't travel by plane or luxury cruise. No, that wasn't his style. Instead, he would rely on his trusty old pickup truck, a vehicle that had been his companion for decades. He retrofitted it with a mattress in the back, a small camping stove, and a cooler packed with sandwiches and snacks. It wasn't a high-tech RV, but it was perfect for him. His journey began in his home state of New York, where he bid farewell to his skeptical but supportive family. The first stop was Chicago. He had always heard about the city's famous deep dish pizza, and now he finally got to sink his teeth into a slice at a bustling downtown pizzeria. That evening, he wandered into a jazz club, letting the smooth melodies transport him to another era. An era that reminded him of his youth when he and his late wife would dance in their living room to records playing softly on the gramophone. From Chicago, he made his way down to Texas, a state he had only seen in movies. In a small town outside of Austin, he found himself at a ranch where a kind cowboy offered him the chance to ride a horse. Why not? Henry chuckled, accepting the challenge. He quickly realized, however, that riding wasn't as easy as it looked. The horse trotted forward, and Henry nearly lost his balance, gripping the saddle for dear life. "Hang on tight, Grandpa," a young stable hand called out, laughing. Despite the near mishap, he loved every moment of it. The road led him westward through vast deserts and mountain ranges, each landscape more breathtaking than the last. He spent nights sleeping under the stars, listening to the soothing symphony of crickets and the occasional rustling of the wind. In Arizona, he stopped at the Grand Canyon and stood at the edge, marveling at the deep, winding chasms that seemed to stretch infinitely. "Pictures never do it justice," he whispered to himself. When he finally reached California, he drove straight to the coast, parking his truck by a quiet beach. He rolled down the windows and let the salty breeze fill his lungs, watching as the waves kissed the shore under the golden glow of the setting sun. He had never seen the Pacific Ocean before, and now, sitting there, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. He had made it. He had followed through on his adventure, and he had done it on his own. Of course, the journey hadn't been without its struggles. Long hours behind the wheel left his back aching. There were moments when he found himself hopelessly lost, having to stop at gas stations and diners to ask for directions. One evening, his truck broke down in the middle of nowhere, and for a brief moment, he wondered if maybe everyone had been right. Maybe he was too old for this. But then, a kind mechanic stopped to help, and soon, he was back on the road. Every challenge, every unexpected turn, was just another part of the adventure. By the time he returned home, his heart was full. He had done something most people only dreamed of, proving to himself and everyone else that growing old didn't mean giving up on life's adventures. "So, what's next, Grandpa?" Jake asked eagerly, looking at him with admiration. Mr. Henry chuckled, placing a new pin on the map. "We'll see. The world is still big, and I've got a little more left in me yet. Growing old doesn't mean the journey has to end. As long as curiosity burns within, the world will always have something new to offer." Story 4. The Tech-Savvy Grandma, Mrs. Eleanor had always been a firm believer in the old ways. At 80 years old, she prided herself on never relying on modern technology. "Back in my day, we didn't have smartphones, and we got by just fine," she often told her friends during their weekly knitting circles. To her, technology was an unnecessary complication. She found comfort in the crisp pages of her daily newspaper, the scent of fresh soil in her garden, and the simple pleasure of handwritten letters. She watched younger generations glued to their screens, shaking her head with a knowing smile, convinced that such habits were beyond her time. But everything changed when her beloved granddaughter, Emily, moved away to another city for work. Emily and Mrs. Eleanor had always been inseparable. They spent countless afternoons chatting over tea, exchanging stories, and enjoying each other's company. However, with the physical distance between them, their conversations became brief phone calls, never quite enough to capture the warmth and joy of their usual meetings. "Grandma, why don't you learn how to video call?" Emily suggested one evening. "That way, we can see each other whenever we want." Mrs. Eleanor scoffed at the idea. "I don't know how to use those things, dear. What if I press the wrong button? I might break the phone." Emily chuckled. "Phones aren't as fragile as you think. I promise I'll teach you step by step." It's just like learning a new recipe, one step at a time. Mrs. Eleanor hesitated, but seeing the hope in Emily's eyes, she knew she had to try. And so, with her granddaughter's patient guidance, Mrs. Eleanor embarked on her smartphone journey. Her first attempts were clumsy. She squinted at the screen, poked at the wrong icons, and once accidentally turned on the flashlight, blinding herself in the process. "Good heavens! This thing has too many buttons," she exclaimed. But she was determined. She practiced every day, repeating each step Emily taught her. And then, one day, it happened. She successfully made her first video call. Emily's smiling face appeared on the screen, and for the first time in weeks, they were able to see each other. Mrs. Eleanor let out a laugh, her eyes twinkling with delight. "Well, I'll be. It's almost like you're right here in my living room. No wonder you young folks are always glued to these things." From that moment on, Eleanor embraced technology in her way. She learned how to send text messages, though her first few attempts were either blank or filled with amusing typos. She discovered the wonders of searching for new recipes online, surprising her friends with dishes she had never attempted before. She even found exercise tutorials designed for seniors, enjoying light stretches in the morning while following along on her phone. Of course, not everything went smoothly. There were times when she accidentally sent a message to the wrong person, started a video call at the most unexpected moments, or even locked herself out of her phone. But each mistake was met with laughter rather than frustration. "I may be old, but I'm still learning. You all need to be patient with me," she would say with a grin. Her newfound knowledge didn't just bring her closer to Emily, it opened up an entirely new world. She reconnected with old friends through social media, joined a group for gardening enthusiasts, and even participated in virtual book clubs. The very thing she once feared had now become a tool for enriching her life. Mrs. Eleanor's story is a reminder that technology isn't a barrier. It's a bridge. No matter our age, we are all capable of learning something new. So the question remains, have you ever considered learning something you once thought was beyond your reach? Will you leap, or will you let doubt hold you back from embracing the possibilities of the modern world? If you are still watching this video and finding these lessons useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Story 5. Mr. Lewis and the Garden of Memories. At 79, Mr. Lewis had come to understand one undeniable truth. There are things in life that can be lost and regained, but passion is not one of them. And for him, that passion was his beloved garden. It was more than just a collection of plants. It was a living tapestry of memories, a place where every bloom and every leaf held a piece of his past. The garden had been his refuge, his solace, and his greatest pride for as long as he could remember. Every morning, he followed the same ritual. He would wake early, brew himself a strong cup of coffee, and step out into the crisp morning air. The scent of damp earth and fresh blossoms greeted him like an old friend. He would take slow, deliberate steps along the winding stone path, his hands gently brushing against the leaves and petals as if they, too, needed the reassurance of his presence. His garden was a vibrant mix of colors and textures, each plant carefully chosen and nurtured over the years. The roses, deep crimson and soft pink, had been planted in memory of his late wife, Margaret, who had adored their fragrance. The towering sunflowers, always reaching skyward, were a reminder of his children's laughter, echoing the joy of their childhood summers spent playing among the stalks. There were lilacs by the old wooden bench where he had once read bedtime stories to his grandchildren, their delicate scent still carrying whispers of those cherished moments. But time had not only allowed his garden to flourish, it had also left its mark on him. His back ached more often now, a dull pain that never quite went away. His knees, once sturdy and strong, protested with every step, reminding him that he could no longer move with the same ease as before. He found himself pausing more frequently, resting against the iron railing, sighing at the quiet betrayal of old age. One afternoon, as he sat on his bench, watching the golden light filter through the trees, his son, Daniel, joined him. "Dad, maybe it's time to take a break," Daniel said gently. "We could hire someone to take care of the garden, or maybe just let it grow naturally." Mr. Lewis looked at his son, his heart heavy. He knew Daniel meant well, but how could he explain? This garden was more than just a hobby. It was an extension of himself, a testament to a lifetime of love and dedication. To let it go would be like surrendering a part of his soul. "If my legs aren't as steady, I'll sit while I work," he finally said. "If my hands aren't as strong, I'll find simpler plants to care for." And so he adapted. He reorganized his garden, bringing smaller potted plants closer to where he could easily reach them. He hung delicate flowers along the balcony, where the wind could sway them gently without his help. He placed a sturdy stool near his flower beds, allowing him to tend to his plants without the strain of standing too long. His days became slower but no less fulfilling. He learned to appreciate the little things, the way the morning dew clung to the petals, the subtle shift in the breeze before a summer storm, the quiet hum of bees drifting from bloom to bloom. He no longer needed to dig deep into the soil or lift heavy pots. Just feeling the cool leaves between his fingers, watching the way sunlight played across the petals was enough. One evening, as he sat on his bench, a warm cup of tea in hand, he realized something profound. Gardening was never about the size of the space or the amount of effort put into it. It was about the joy of nurturing life, about the simple pleasure of watching something grow under his care. His garden was smaller now, but his happiness remained untouched. For Mr. Lewis, gardening wasn't just about growing plants. It was about planting joy, about cultivating hope for the days ahead. Perhaps the real question is, when we grow old, will we still hold on to the things that bring us happiness? Will we continue cherishing life's little joys, or will we let time take everything away? Mr. Lewis had made his choice. What will yours be? Story 6. Mrs. Catherine and her decision to stay home. At 86, Mrs. Catherine understood that her body was not what it used to be. The once effortless tasks of her daily life had slowly become more challenging. The stairs seemed steeper, household chores felt heavier, and at times, the silence in her large home felt more profound than ever. The house, once filled with the laughter of children and the steady hum of family life, now echoed with memories. Yet, despite the solitude, this place remained her sanctuary. Her children, loving and concerned, worried about her well-being. They urged her to move into a nursing home, a place where she would receive care, companionship, and constant supervision. "You'll have friends, round-the-clock nurses, and nothing to worry about anymore," they reassured her. But Catherine simply smiled, her eyes filled with quiet determination. "I don't want a place where my schedule is decided for me, where someone tells me when to eat, when to sleep, and when to take a walk. I want to be somewhere that still feels like home." To her, the house was far more than just walls and a roof. It was a lifetime of love, laughter, and cherished moments. It was where she and her late husband had spent long nights painting the living room, splattering color on each other and laughing like young lovers. It was where her children had run through the hallways, their tiny feet pattering against the wooden floors, filling the space with joy. It was where she had sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the seasons change, each one marking another chapter of her life. How could she leave all of that behind just because she was growing older? Of course, living alone was not without its challenges. There were days when she felt the weight of her age pressing upon him, when her joints ached a little more than usual, or when the loneliness crept in unexpectedly. But instead of allowing these obstacles to dictate her life, Mrs. Catherine chose to adapt. She asked her son to install sturdy railings along the stairs, ensuring she could move around safely. She put anti-slip mats in every room and invested in better lighting to prevent accidents. Recognizing that some tasks were now beyond her strength, she hired a housekeeper to come in a few times a week to help with cleaning, laundry, and the heavier chores. But she knew that safety and convenience alone were not enough. She needed connection, stimulation, and a sense of belonging. So, she joined a senior community group at the local recreation center. Every Wednesday afternoon, she met with a group of spirited women and men who, like her, had stories to tell and wisdom to share. They sipped tea, exchanged book recommendations, played board games, and reminisced about days gone by. She even discovered a love for painting, something she hadn't done since her youth, and found immense joy in expressing herself through colors and brushstrokes. Aging, for Mrs. Catherine, did not mean giving up on the things she cherished. It did not mean relinquishing her independence or surrendering to the passage of time. It simply meant finding ways to hold on to the essence of who she was for as long as she could. She refused to let others decide the course of her life. Instead, she made thoughtful choices that allowed her to live with dignity, comfort, and joy. There was a quiet strength in her decision. Not everyone understood it, but that was all right. It was her journey, and she intended to walk it on her terms. If you are still watching this video and finding these lessons useful, please comment number 3 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Story 7. Mr. Victor and his journey back to memories. At 85, Mr. Victor no longer had the strength for long trips like he once did in his younger days. He had been an avid traveler, someone who found joy in driving through small towns, discovering quiet little streets, and sitting for hours by the river, simply listening to the gentle flow of water. Every journey had been an adventure, every destination a new story to tell. He and his wife had spent decades exploring together, hand in hand, collecting moments like treasured souvenirs. But time had a way of changing things, and now, with his frail legs and slowing body, the idea of another long journey seemed like an impossible dream. One afternoon, while tidying up his bookshelf, he stumbled upon an old wooden box tucked behind a row of forgotten novels. It was filled with photographs, snapshots of sunlit streets, rolling vineyards, and charming little cafes where he and his wife had once laughed over cups of rich espresso. As he flipped through them, the memories flooded back, not with sorrow, but with warmth, like the comforting embrace of an old friend. For a moment, he could almost hear the distant chatter of a Parisian cafe, feel the crisp mountain air of the Swiss Alps, and taste the sweet buttery layers of a Viennese pastry melting on his tongue. A thought struck him. If I can't go to the world, why not bring the world to me? And so, Mr. Victor began a new kind of journey, one without borders or physical limits. He enlisted the help of his grandchildren, who eagerly scoured the internet for travel documentaries and immersive videos of the places he had once visited. Each morning, he would settle into his favorite armchair, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, and travel through the screen. From the winding canals of Venice to the bustling streets of Tokyo, he wandered without ever leaving home. His world, instead of shrinking, expanded in a way he had never imagined. But Mr. Victor didn't stop there. If he could see these places again, he wanted to taste them, too. He began recreating the flavors of his past adventures, one dish at a time. He asked his daughter-in-law to bake a classic French apple tart, just like the one he had in a tiny bakery near the Seine. The next day, he sipped a rich, full-bodied Italian wine while watching a sunset over Tuscany. On his screen, yes, but in his heart, he was there. With each bite, each sip, he was transported back to those cherished moments, not in longing but in joyful remembrance. One evening, as he sat on his porch, watching the golden hues of the setting sun filter through the trees, a young neighbor stopped by for a chat. "Mr. Victor," the boy asked curiously, "don't you ever feel sad that you can't travel the way you used to?" Mr. Victor smiled, his eyes twinkling with wisdom. "The best part of a journey," he said, "isn't the distance traveled, but the memories we carry. And those memories, we can relive them as many times as we want. The choices we make as we age. Growing old doesn't mean surrendering to a confined life, following strict schedules, and living within the four walls of a nursing home. It is not a sentence of monotony or solitude. These stories have shown that even when age is no longer on your side, you can still take control of your life. You can still choose to live with curiosity, joy, and adventure. As we come to the end of these inspiring stories, take a moment to reflect. What have you learned today? Has it changed the way you see aging, independence, or the choices we make as we grow older? Each of these remarkable individuals showed us that age is not a barrier to living life on our terms. Whether it's embracing new experiences like Mrs. Agatha, staying independent like Mr. Bernard, or finding joy in the small things like Mr. Lewis, there's always a way to live with purpose and fulfillment. Now, we want to hear from you. Comment below and share one thing you've learned from this video that you'll bring into your own life. Your insight might just inspire someone else. If you like this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiring content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.